Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Produce Buzzers podcast. We are so happy you have joined us today, and I think you will be too after the show is over, because you will learn a lot about fresh fruits and vegetables, how to select and store them, how to prepare and cook them, and surprising facts about their history and origin. We hope it inspires you to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, not only for your health, but also for your delight and pleasure as you explore their amazing world of taste and delicious flavors. Eating more of them will transform your life in so many positive ways. So settle back, relax, and get ready for another delicious adventure with the Produce Buzzers. Produce Buzzers podcast fans, and welcome to another delicious episode of the Produce Buzzers podcast. I'm Edwin Stepp, your host and editor of producebuzz.com. I'm joined once again by Teresa Nolan, the founder and president of Produce Buzz, and Cynthia Benedetto, a contributing editor to Produce Buzz. Our dearly beloved brother Rick can't make it today. He's away at a high school reunion. I don't know, he's an old guy. It could be his 70th. I don't know. Probably 50th, I think. But we'll miss him, but we're going to go on. And today, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, we are going to talk about watermelons. Who doesn't love watermelons? Watermelons, you exclaim? Isn't the season over for them by now? Surely you mean to talk about pumpkins this time of year, right? Well, no to both questions. Watermelons are never out of season. That's right. And today we have a special guest to tell us how that can be and why you should be including watermelon on your shopping list all year long. She will reveal some surprising info about them that will convince you of this. Rachel Syngo is the Chief Marketing Officer of Melon One, the oldest and largest shipper of watermelons in the United States. She has real passion for the work she is doing. And when we met at a recent produce trade show, I realized we have to have her on the podcast to share that passion, because as our listeners know, we are all about passion for all things fruit and veggie. Rachel joined the Melon One team in 2016 and is central in the sales and marketing for the company. Rachel is the 8th generation in her family to work in American agriculture and in watermelon farming. She is an active member of multiple state watermelon association chapters, as well as a member of the executive committee of the National Watermelon Association. Rachel works in the Florida headquarters office of Melon One and travels with the crop as it goes from region to region and the seasons change. In her free time, Rachel enjoys spending time with her son and her husband on her family's ranch in Punta Gorda, Florida. Rachel, welcome to the show. So thankful that you joined us.
Thank you. That was such a warm welcome. I hope I can live up to all of that. I feel like everything brings the energy and facts. And yes. I'm going to start with, you can save a pumpkin and you can carve a watermelon, and we'll talk more about that later.
Oh, okay, great. I can't wait to hear that. But first, before we talk about watermelons or pumpkins, let's tell us more about Rachel Syngo. How did you wind up in the watermelon business? Did you grow up in the business?
I feel as though it's not overstating it too much to say I was born to be ultimately in this business. Right. So my family has been farming since they originally immigrated here from France. That was 12 generations ago.
Wow.
So we've never stopped farming that entire time. But watermelons have been one of the crops, and then exclusively the crop for the last 3 generations. We've done watermelons exclusively, but the last 8 watermelons have been a big piece of it. With that said, I didn't, like most rebellious teenagers, I worked with the family business. I counted bin tags. I double checked harvester tags, which was terrifying at my age. But I worked in the business. I saw my father get up and go to work every single day, 7 days a week, and said, I'm going to do something else. I want my own identity. And so I did. I went to college and I got an English degree of all things, and a minor in human resources. And I went and worked for Target Corporation, actually, for 6 years. and spread my wings and did all the corporate ladder stuff.
Yeah.
And I got a phone call one day, and it was like, you know, we could really use some of that expertise back here. And, you know, in my mind, I'd been around, I'd traveled, I'd seen what all they had built, but I hadn't been all up in it. So much to my surprise, they were correct. They definitely needed more help and leadership. And it started under the guise of just everything you've learned, just bring it, we'll apply it.
Yeah.
And then the natural fit for me was not in production on the farm, because we had plenty of people doing that.
Right.
But we did have a gap in, I don't want to say sales, because that's an insult to the team that was here, right? But we definitely had a lot of opportunities for growth in marketing and branding. And 2016 was a strange time, and it still is in agriculture, where the ag story wasn't being told very well. And there was kind of a vocal minority who was telling it wrong with a lot of scary misinformation.
Right.
I saw that as an extreme challenge. I was ready, like, let's go. I want to be all up in this. So one of the many things I do is go to all those trade shows where you and I met. Where I can talk to people that are in the industry that kind of get it, they understand. And then I spend a lot of time talking to consumers as much as I possibly can. Just trying to tell what does American agriculture look like now? What does the American farmer look like now? And often it's different than what people think.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked a bit about that on this show, the misperceptions about American agriculture. There's several ones that we hit occasionally, but what are maybe one or two of the things that you've identified that needs to be heard more?
One of the things I think is important to get out in front of is the idea that a corporate farm is a bad thing. You know, I think that buzzword alone, like every grower has filed an LLC and is a corporation. It's certainly not meant to be scary. It's usually a very small staff, very, very small percentages of farms. I mean, in the single digits are owned by what you're imagining is a huge corporation.
Right.
And we'll talk a little more about how we operate, but you know, most of them are family farms, most of which are multi-generation, because it's hard to just wake up and get all the equipment and expertise you would need to farm. So I think that's a big one.
And that's one we've addressed a lot. And one of my pet, I don't want to say peeves, because I think it's just a misunderstanding. You know, you can't get angry at people for misunderstanding it. But especially in the fruit and vegetable world, it is mostly all small family farms, multi-generational. And they may come under a big name like Melon One or Driscoll's or some of the other brands that people would know out there. But generally, it's hundreds, sometimes hundreds of small family farms that are contributing to that supply. So that is something that I think is a big misperception out there. You know, when it comes to wheat and some of the bigger crops for agriculture, some of that is pretty big ag. And maybe that's not bad either. I'm not saying that's bad, but
I think that's bad either. I think, you know, the amount of hard work and love and devotion that goes into it, no matter who you are, I mean, you wouldn't be in a crop like that just to do it, just for the money. It's just not a profession you can be in for the money, because sometimes the money isn't there. And I think that's something maybe people, if you know a grower down the street and he's got a nice house and a fairly new pickup, he's just riding the wave right now. That's not always consistent. And also the guy with the old pickup that's down the road, that doesn't mean he's dirt poor either. You know, it always kind of comes in cycles and waves. And I you know, as someone who's in it, I always want to tell folks who aren't how hard we're always working. And I don't want to overly cram that down people's throats, because so are teachers and nurses and all these other professions. But there is a lot of misconception around what we do and how we get it done and what it takes to do it.
That what you said about the pickup reminds me of a joke. If you'll indulge me, I'll tell it. You may have heard this one. So there was these two farmers in Texas, and they were sitting at the bar, and they were bragging about, you know, one was bragging about his ranch, the other was bragging about his ranch. And one of them says to the other, you know, I can get up in the morning, get in my pickup, drive all day long till nightfall, and still not be at the edge of my ranch. And the other one looked at him and said, yeah, I used to have a pickup like that too.
guys like that too. I know some ladies like that too.
So anyway, but the other thing that you touched on or briefly alluded to is that the farmers are at the risk of Mother Nature, or at the what is the right word? The
mercy.
Yes, thank you. Of Mother Nature, and it's not like producing widgets, is it? So,
professional gamblers have nothing on farmers, right? It's just a gamble against the weather.
That's good.
My dad would love to hear you say that, because he says that all the time. He gets mad when there's not enough movement at retail, or truck drivers, ladies like, we're not shipping widgets.
Right. That's great. That's right. That's so true. Yeah. And the other thing that comes with that is, food. People complain about the price of food these days, but food, especially fruits and vegetables, are still so inexpensive compared to other things that we think we have to have. We don't need them, but we need this. But still, food is such a bargain, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later too, I think. But again, I see your passion here. You seem so passionate about it. I think you may have already answered this question, but I'd love you to talk about it a little bit more. Where does that passion come from for this business?
I think by nature, I'm a highly energetic person. I'm overly caffeinated any given point of any given day. But when you're this close to it, I think that's really what it comes from, right? When I hear things that are misinformation, it energizes me and want to feed it the other way. But even when it's not, again, I woke up many mornings of my life in the buddy seat or on the floor of a tractor, because I had to get up and go to work. So when you've been raised that way, and he was raised that way, and my grandfather was raised that way, and they basically, my grandfather, my great uncle escaped farming to go to the military for a few years, because that was a better option.
that was a vacation, wasn't it?
In the 50s, that was 4 years of a break.
Right.
So when you look at how hard it is to do what we do, I want to tell people that, we do it because we love it. So that kind of oozes out of me. But I live in a very, my family is all very close. My uncle is one of the farmers that we buy watermelons from. A bunch of my cousins work with me. Obviously I still work for my father. He's still very involved. And the other owners of Melon One, it's the same thing. Their families are very tight knit. My grandparents, we all still live in the same town. We just kind of live and breathe it all day, every day, that I almost don't know what else to talk about. I could be a little dull and talk politics and debates and all that, but everyone's doing that years like this. So, to me, I'd much rather talk about what we're doing in agriculture. And I think produce is really the fun sector of agriculture, right? I know dairy has all the got milk stuff, but and produce, we're really where it's at. This is the fun part of what you eat and what's on your plate.
Right.
Now you understand how this podcast evolved.
I do. In the beginning, I thought, okay, this is the most relatable thing. It dominates the conversation. How can we do it better? How can we do it more profitable? How can we spread distribution so we can get our product further to more people? That is the topic. That's all we're ever talking about.
Yeah, that's great. I found a post from you, Rachel, on LinkedIn that I want to read.
Okay.
Because I think it really shows your passion. So this is from one of her posts a while back. She wrote, full circle moment for me. I started at Target in 2009 as a grocery executive. This is one of my very first stores. She's standing in a store in the produce section. I would always stop to look in the bins at different store visits, the bins of watermelons, and hope to see Melon One labels to see what my family's business was up to. 14 years later, I'm back in the family biz where I belong, and Melon One is in Target stores all over the East Coast. But I will never forget one of my coworkers always telling me I should really quit talking about watermelons. Respectfully, screw that guy. I love that. That is great. We get that sometimes too.
You kind of knew where you were always supposed to eventually go. And when I look back, I think I always knew that. I just didn't want to admit it. I was a little stubborn. I wanted to form my own path. But when I got into retail and then ended up in grocery anyway, it was like, hey, Dad, how do we get you in here? Like, how does this happen? So I can talk about it even more to people that don't care.
Right.
But I'm going to make them. So
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about Melon One then. You
Yeah.
told me that it's the oldest and largest shipper of watermelons in the U.S. Tell us a bit about its history, how it got started, when.
All right. So today, still, there are 3 owners of Melon One, and they were each, at the time when they started it, the 3rd generation in their family to work in watermelons, actually, to work in the crop. So my father is one. So we've been farming in South Florida for multiple generations at that point. And he, the word broker in produce, especially years ago, but maybe still a little today, was kind of synonymous with like a crook. I mean, it just, they didn't have a great reputation for paying growers or paying them accurately. So he was like, I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to have to be the one in the family. I'm going to branch out. I'm going to start selling our watermelons. And that required him to get other farmers to work with also. And one of the guys he starts working with in the business that has the retail and the distribution relationships was John Lapede out of New York. And that, is very foreign to us. I mean, we're rednecks in Florida. We don't, there's no bones about it. We're Southern old Florida people. And so John and his family had been in, sales and distribution and wholesale of watermelons for a very long time. And he had taken over the family business at that point, and he was in sales. And then our 3rd owner, still currently, is Hamilton Dix out of South Carolina. And his father and grandfather were some of the first people to ever put produce on the railroad through the Carolinas going south. So they had been in produce and watermelon farming and greenhouses and everything to do with it. So at one point in around 1992, they merged. John and Hammy actually first, and then my dad came in 2 years later. And that was just what happened. They said, we're going to combine forces so that we can, really, they were thinking of the grower, so that we can go to them and say, we know we have the business. We're going to make this easier on you. And if we have to prove it, that's fine. But we're just going to be integrity based. If we just do it right and we just pay everyone a fair price, like we think we'll earn it, we'll earn your trust, we'll earn the relationships. And that's worked over time ever since. It's really amazing what they did. I don't think at any point in my life and in the next generation of Melon One, we will never have to mentally and probably physically work as hard as those guys did. I mean, they did it all. They did more with less. I'm forever, I have so much admiration. So, flash forward where that started with a handful of growers and a handful of states. We have 26 family farms we work with now in 8 different states outside of our own farms. So I think that's really a testament to who those guys are and what they built this business on and the people they've brought in to make sure that it can continue. And a lot of that is there's a lot of family, because that's the nature of what we do. And it's the nature of the clientele we serve on the farm side. But there's a lot of folks that aren't. They just also have a passion for the type of work that we do. And I think that translates to our retail partners and even our transportation and trucking partners. We always say, like, business is personal. Who you choose to do business with is personal at every level, including a retail buyer. Because the good old days of phone calls and seeing them a few times a year and dinners, that's almost out. So you really have to try to tell people, like, we're in it for the long haul. We're here. This is all we do. So that's always our sales pitch. We only grow packaged watermelons. We're not in anything else. That's how committed we are to this one crop and this one group of growers we work with.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, here's something I didn't tell you, I don't think, in any of our times talking, but my dad also had retail produce markets in North and South Carolina, a few of them spread out. Some of them were just like fruit stands. We had a pretty big one in Charlotte for many years. And I used to do a lot of the buying for that market off of the Columbia, South Carolina farmers market when it was down by the stadium.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I would go for each week was watermelons. So I would take a tractor and trailer down there and we'd load it full of watermelons. I may have bought, I don't know if Hamilton Dix sold on that market, but
there's no way that didn't happen.
Yeah, so I'm sure I bought watermelons from him.
That's right. There's no way that didn't happen.
Yeah. There were some Florida people that would come to that market too when the season would first start before the South Carolina melons came in. So it could be I bought from your family as well. I don't know.
All of that is possible. Yeah. It certainly is. The stories I've heard, that's the stuff I'm talking about, though. The way you had to buy watermelons then, the way my dad was 16 and he'd take a truck and trailer to the Atlanta market or Columbia market. Yeah. And my granddad would give him like $40. You're like, survive.
Yeah,
like, right. Truck. Make sure you sell all these. Don't like bring me
come back.
That's wild, that is wild west of produce.
Right. And I remember in those days that we didn't use bins.
No, that was
they were loaded by hand.
Yeah.
With a chain of laborers tossing them. You've probably seen that or aware of that.
Yeah. That's still how we harvest. I mean,
interesting.
It's still all done by hand, the way we harvest. And truly, we pull them off a conveyor belt when we pack them in the bins, but it's still a set of hands picking up your watermelon and putting it now in a bin versus stacked up nice in a trailer.
And of course, most of those workers on the Columbia market were black guys, and they would sing while they counted the melons because we'd buy them by the piece. So I said, well, give me 500, and they get in a chain and they'd sing the numbers as they counted, and that was really, and they'd harmonize. It was really something to watch.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
I'm sure your dad is well aware of that, and maybe you are too. Maybe you've seen that before.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough about me. We got to get back.
I love it.
Got to get back to you. So we teased our listeners that they should be thinking about watermelons year round. Not as a seasonal fruit, but one that is available, flavorful, and affordable all year long. How do you get that year-round supply? Tell us about that.
Well, I'll start, with let's go back 50 years to today. One of the biggest, there's two major factors that make that possible outside of, this is not any kind of lab-grown fruit. We didn't mutate them so you can do that. So first and foremost, trucking made all the difference in the world. When we got into, full-size semi-trucks, being able to haul watermelons, a bigger availability of those drivers, refrigerated trailers, you can just move that much further, that much faster before your produce breaks down. Okay, so when we look at multiple decades, that was a major improvement. You could take things a lot further, and you could afford to pay a service to do that, right? That wasn't my dad or somebody's son saying, hey, drive it up to this market 8 hours away or less. I can go, to Boston in 2 days now.
Yeah.
So that made a big difference over time. And then, reaching consumers and creating demand is always important. But as we converted from seeded to seedless, and we're going to talk about seeded, I'm sure there's certainly still out there, but dominantly we're in the seedless world. That's what consumers outstandingly tell us they want. That rind is different. It is thicker. It is harder, which makes it much more sturdy for transportation. And then even internally, the internal flesh tastes a little different. The cell walls are a little thicker, so that you're getting almost a week longer in shelf life. Well, that means I can take it on the road for a couple extra days.
Yeah.
So all of that makes it to where you can truly have closer to a year-round supply. Now, we do have a shoulder season in watermelons, meaning we cannot grow them within the United States. We got to get further towards the equator. So what Melon does, everybody has a country or a location, but we import from our own farm in Guatemala.
Yeah.
Those watermelons, because of all those improvements we've just talked about, they can sit on a refrigerated container on a boat for an extra 3 days before it gets back into Florida, before I quality check them at our location here, and then they take the 2-day trip to your store.
Yeah.
Well, depending on where you're going, but from Florida, they have to go somewhere. Right. So it could be later that afternoon if it's in Orlando, or it could be 2 days later if you're in New Jersey.
Right. Got it. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about the actual variety becoming more hardy in that transportation and availability. That's an interesting thought. Well, but let's think about this now. All right. So we're telling consumers they should be buying watermelons in December and January. But they're coming on a boat. Isn't that going to make them too costly? It's going to be too expensive.
Does it add to the cost? Sure. Of course it does. The thing about watermelon that makes it amazing is the size of it, right? We have never been talking about a tiny handheld fruit. We are not talking about a single serving. So the same 20 servings you get out of it in the summer, you're still getting out of it in the winter. So that cost is broken down a little bit. So what we do for easy math is, let's say a watermelon is $5 in the summer. And Lord knows this summer it was probably up a little bit from that, but $5 in the summer, that's because it's coming from closer by at some point. We start in Florida and we work our way up the East Coast. At some point in your season, we're nearby your state if we're not in your state. So obviously the transportation costs and all that is a little less. But when we get down into Guatemala and we've got to transport it that much up, of course it adds to it. So let's say the most you're paying now is $10 a watermelon. That's still only 50 cents a serving. That means that's an inch size slice of watermelon, maybe 50 cents. Whereas that same, so if you take a $5 clamshell of berries that has 3 servings in it, you're still paying $1.50. So from a dollars and cents perspective, it's still very affordable. It's still very accessible. Most retailers nowadays are selling watermelon in at least one of 2 ways. A lot of them, your big chains, your Sam's Clubs and Walmarts and Kroger's, they're selling whole watermelons year round. But your smaller chains are selling some version of cut watermelon or mini watermelons year round. So watermelon itself is accessible no matter where you are 365 days a year.
Right. And it is, if not, it's definitely one of the least expensive fruits you can buy all year round, if it's not the least expensive when you compare it on a per pound basis. And you did per serving, but per pound as well. So it is, and it's delicious. I know people like to eat them when it's hot. So they think about it more when it's hot than when it's cold, but I eat it all year round. So
and Rachel, what do you consider a serving size?
So what I consider a serving size is like a slice. That's how most people are eating their watermelon. But if you're someone who cubes it, it's a cup of watermelon.
Okay. So like I consider a serving size like a quarter of a watermelon because I love it so much.
Well,
we don't
my
ask
serving size is a little smaller. Yours might be $1 or so a serving size.
Okay, now you said 26 different regions or states. I can't remember what you said.
We're in 8 different states where we're growing, packing, shipping from, and we work with 26 family farms.
Oh, okay.
Our own farm.
Got it.
So
All right,
our own farm is a good size, but everyone else are family farms.
Is Florida the best place to grow?
This is sensitive, very sensitive.
So sensitive to, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but yes, Florida is the best place to grow. Like, it just is a fact. So I will say there's 2 states where we can grow a fall crop, which is Florida, and then way out on the coast, like around Beaufort, South Carolina, you can grow. So you can have your traditional spring crop, and then you can do it in the fall. So to me, those 2 states are absolutely great growing regions. Everywhere else, it gets too cold. We can't even do it in very southern Georgia,
And the quality's the same?
Yeah, you'll see the same quality. I will actually argue, there's a lot of conspiracy theories as to why, but I think the Florida fall crop of watermelons is my favorite one all year. That's where, to me, the flavor is just the best. Not just sweetness, because sometimes I'll taste a really sweet watermelon, but it's like not well rounded or something, right? It doesn't have that like heirloom flavor you're looking for. But to me, you definitely get those throughout the fall, which is sad because as many people don't get them as do in the summer.
And what's the fall season? What dates are you talking about?
So pretty much everything after Labor Day. So what we start harvesting after Labor Day and then all the way to about December 1st constitutes the fall season in watermelons.
Okay. And is watermelon, is it measured by bricks level?
Yes. So that's our biggest point of love and or contention with when we do quality checks.
So what's the best number?
I would, 10 is the minimum for everybody.
Let me interrupt and we've talked about bricks on the show before, but there may be some listeners who don't know what that is. Okay. It's basically the percentage of sugar in a fruit or vegetable. And I think it is actually the percentages. And when you say 10, that's 10% of whatever the volume is sugar. Is that right? Yep. Or am I wrong?
Yep. That's right. Yes, that's essentially what it is. Yeah. Right. The sugary content.
I thought it was a soluble sugar, so I don't know.
You would say it's 10% of soluble sugar? Cynthia's studied this in her
It
a
could be.
million years ago, and I've forgotten more than I ever learned. But so I thought it was the soluble sugars, and I don't know if that makes a difference because I don't know if there are sugars in the rind or other ways to measure it.
I can only tell you that by taste testing. I would say no, because the rind just tastes like a cucumber.
Right. Well, it would be from the juice, right? They don't. You got when I remember we used to test our apples with the bricks. It was like a little glass you look through.
Refractometer.
Refractometer.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Very good. And it would show, but you just put a drop of juice on the lens.
That's right.
And it would show somehow.
So 10's the least that you would harvest, and what is the most?
So there is no most. Like, we don't stop at any certain level, but the most I have seen on a consistent crop, certain varieties, is like a 14. And that is rivaling. So I'm gonna have to bust a myth in case anyone doesn't know, but seeded are technically sweeter. I mean, their bricks level is a little higher than seedless. And some people love that, some people don't, but that is a fact. So 14, that's really rivaling like a seeded watermelon consistent. That is very, very sweet. Very, very sweet watermelon.
Well, that was one of my questions I had for you, was about seeded versus seedless. So, but I think the difference there, I have this nostalgic view of the watermelons we used to get when I was a kid, and the ones I bought at that market, and they were not seedless, but they were so sweet. But I don't think there's enough difference now in what I taste to make it make a huge difference. But
in my opinion, and that is a very personal question, I guess, for people, but in my opinion, there's not either. I know, the FDA puts out our fact panel. It's all, from a nutritional fact standpoint, it's all just watermelon. I mean, it's all that close together.
Right.
Doesn't matter if it's seeded or seedless, all of that is the same. But I'm the oldest grandchild in my family, and I have very vivid memories of my great-grandfather was really, he was one, him and my great-grandmother, Mamu and Peepaw to us, but they really pulled everybody together. We had a lot of family gatherings. They never left, they lived in Oclotney, Georgia, near Thomasville, and family reunions were it for them. And so I'm fortunate enough, I was old enough to be able to spend time and have really good memories. And my Peepaw would eat. He would come around when you were done eating your watermelon and like eat down to the rest of the rind. I mean, and they were always seeded, and they were huge. And we have pictures of the slices that are 3 times the size of your head,
Right.
And he would get all the way down, squeeze all the juice down, pour it in a cup with the seeds. And he was the only human I've ever known that really ate them almost like a sunflower seed. If you really focus, you can crack a big black seed and there's a smaller seed inside, and nothing went to waste with him. And when I think of that, and I think of him, and I think of those memories, I think that's what a lot of people go back to sometimes, because those are not a singular person fruit, right? Like a seeded watermelon is meant to be shared. It's huge. So I do think that nostalgia is a really good word to apply to that.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned the watermelon seeds. I spent 2 summers when I was in college in China back in the day when it was just emerging, and watermelon was, that was their favorite fruit. They were everywhere. But one other thing they did with them, they would take the seeds and roast them like you would a sunflower seed. And I've not seen those anywhere in the States. They probably are somewhere. Do you guys ever sell your seeds?
I've never seen them. I do know one of our friendly competitors, the watermelon industry is actually so small. They had sold the seeds before to people that do shelling, because that internal seed in China, especially, I want to say it was maybe 2019, kind of, everything in life is kind of pre and post pandemic. And that was supposed to be the next superfood. It was going to take over avocados. It was the watermelon seed, and they were grinding it up into a flour and a powder and putting it in everything. I've never seen that kind of movement here in the States.
Right. They would roast them. I think they would sort of like you would do roasted peanuts. I think they soaked them in some sort of salt brine because they were very salty. But they were delicious. They were, they're not, watermelon seeds not big, so you had to struggle with it a bit. It was a little bit of a work.
That's right.
But anyway, so that's interesting. Well, what are the 8 states? You mentioned 8 states, but what are those?
So we start our season in South Florida, and we kind of work our way north, right? So we hit Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky and Indiana, and then Maryland and Delaware. So as we finish our season right around, what I think people think of watermelon season is kind of that Memorial Day to Labor Day is the heart of it. So as we finish the end of our year, like we've just now wrapped up in Maryland and Delaware and Kentucky and Indiana, and we've pretty much fully transitioned at this point to our South Carolina fall crop. And a couple more weeks, we'll move back down to our Florida fall crop. We'll go on to Guatemala. So we do make a big circle each year.
Well, this was a revelation to me. I didn't realize you had when you said fall crop, I thought, well, that must be technically still fall, but end of November, December. But you're saying you're harvesting after Labor Day. Is it not too hot to grow watermelons in Florida?
Certain places. So South Carolina has a little, I don't want to say less risk because they're on the coast. So they always have winds and water to deal with and hurricane season and all of that. But yes, when we plant, it's very hot. As we're growing through the season, it's very hot. But there's a lot more risk in farming in the fall. And in Florida, hurricanes are a part of that. We have a lot of viruses that target the fall. So it's definitely only the strong survive or high risk, high reward, depending on how you want to look at it. There's been plenty of times in just the time I've been back at Melon One. I mean, we've had Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Ian wipe us out. That's devastating. I mean, it's financially devastating. It's emotionally devastating for everyone who works here. It's a hard loss. So, that only happens in the fall. There's plenty of people that take the fall off and grow another crop, or they go fishing, or they do something else with their time. But we like to keep the big wheel turning and a little more. Make sure people have good watermelon year round. Someone has to do it. May as well be us.
Right.
And where are the fields? Where are the fields in the fall? Where do you plant?
So in South Carolina, we're way out on the coast in Beaufort, like St. Helena Island.
Yes.
That's where we're at now. And then we're coming down here, right where my office is in Punta Gorda, Florida. So
I didn't realize you had fields there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We have a lot. I mean, we grow as much in the fall here as we do in the spring.
Okay.
And how did you do through Ian?
Ian was a total loss for us.
Really?
Wow. Harvested. I mean, we got maybe 50 truckloads. I shouldn't say it's a total loss. That's a lot of fruit. But we should have done 500. I mean, it was difficult, and it's hard to watch the world move on. Because things just keep on happening. It was hard. We got to really see where our strongest relationships were at retail, because some people just kind of didn't understand. They were irritated or even annoyed that you didn't have product. Meanwhile, that's a really hard grower relationship to have, right? Like, I just lost millions of dollars in product that was in the ground. I won't even see a return on. It's emotionally ravaging to have that happen. And when it's out of your control, somehow it almost feels worse. So we want to kind of take a process and take a beat and kind of like grieve that loss. That I don't know if that's saying it too much, but it's hard.
No, I don't think it's melodramatic at all. And I think that the fact that you said that everybody else moves on, you're saying like, look, we still don't have whatever creature comforts.
Oh yeah. We lived, like the office that I'm in right now, I lived in for 10 days with my husband and my kid and my dog.
Wow.
Because we had actually had power at our warehouse, but not at our home. So us, multiple cousins, multiple farm employees, we had H2A guys that were here from Mexico that were terrified. We all lived in our warehouse for a really long time. And at the same time, there was so much work to do. There was almost no work to do. It was a really strange dynamic. And, after a while though, we're in Florida. We have a lot of friends in the citrus industry. You kind of had to snap yourself out of it. Like we can replant a crop, and in the spring we can rebuild. People that are in tree fruits cannot. People that entirely lost their homes cannot. 6 months from now, their life will not be normal. So we are able, we've been through trials and tribulations. We did get through it. But it made us much more excited to come into this crop and hope for the best, because as you said, Teresa, like we're the biggest gamblers there's ever going to be. We will bet it all and go right back in and hope for the best and do everything that's in our control the best we can and pray for the difference.
Yeah. Well, that's hats off to you. And again, as we mentioned earlier, at the mercy of Mother Nature, and that's really at the mercy of Mother Nature, and
that's
to survive it, and the resilience that you have to keep growing. Hats off. That's all I can say.
When does your Guatemala crop come through?
We start around the first week of December, harvesting there. The best part about that is that a lot of our team goes down there. So a lot of our team goes down there and stays there because we got to be kind of boots on the ground, right? But we always go down to spend a little time, which is just good. This past year, it was great. A lot of our team took like their families just to go see something else culturally, because it's some of the most beautiful farmlands that just anywhere. I mean, there's mountains, very picturesque in the background, just something we don't see even in the Carolinas. It's very beautiful there. And to watch the way they grow, they do things a little different, but it's, everything's similar but different when you look at different crops. But we'll start in December and we'll harvest all the way till about the 10th of March or so. There might be a few stragglers that come in after that, but that's really when things die out because we start harvesting in Florida again, and then the big wheel keeps on keeping on.
How many different varieties do you have, and can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah. So there are hundreds of commercially available varieties.
Oh, really? Oh.
There are so many. Now, what we grow, we have 4 maybe main varieties I'll touch on, and then we use, for every 3 seedless plants we plant in the ground, we always have 1 seeded variety, either a pollinator or a pollinizer. So a lot of times those are big seeded watermelons to fulfill that demand for customers. But in the seedless world, there's a few that have really come in the last 5 years. And seed breeders are always working. They're getting out in front of it as fast as they can. But we're growing more and more varieties that have a darker rind, so they still have the stripe pattern that we're all used to, but a darker rind outside, and then they're much more red inside. And I think for around 10 years, seedless internal quality was very pink. And they're getting more into, I think, the same old thing, nostalgia, right? We remember big, darker, striped watermelons from our childhoods with really red internals. So we're seeing a lot more of that. And then we at Melon One do grow more kind of that semi-firm variety. They have a little more crunch to them. Every now and then you get an off one and it's like, holy moly, that tastes like an apple. It was a little too much. But we do a lot of taste testing, a lot of consumer testing. We really want to grow what people like. And we've learned that you can't make everybody happy. Some people like a really crunchy watermelon. Some like it soft because that's what they remember. But we tried to narrow it down to 4 main varieties that are somewhere in between all of that. They have good sugar, good profile. And on the growing end, the reason we can't just grow one consistently and say every grower we grow, every customer we sell, every Melon One watermelon is always going to look the exact same is, one, you could never, you can't do that produce. But 2, we do need different disease resistance packages with certain watermelons in certain areas. The type of watermelon that grows very well in Florida would not do the same in Delaware and Maryland. So we do a couple different varieties. They look similar, but they are different genetics from different seed companies and stuff like that.
Do you, or are you developing any proprietary varieties? Does that exist in the watermelon world, like apples?
Doesn't exist in the watermelon world today, but I will tell you, we've taken note from what our friends have done in other crops, Florida,
apples especially.
We've seen apples, we've seen tomatoes. A lot of people have gone and said, hey, I'm going to invest in my own R&D and plant pathologists, and we're going to come up with the best combos. We would love to be able to do that one day. That's definitely a very lofty goal we have down the road to make ourselves stand out a little more. I think apples are the classic prime example of that. I'd love to be able to do it.
Yeah, it can be lucrative, selling the trademark.
That's right.
Patented varieties.
Those are the things when we're sitting around having a cocktail that we're not talking about.
Yeah, right. What about yellow watermelons? Do you grow any of those? Or
yellow watermelons? That's really the only, what I would call exotic flesh watermelon that we grow. We don't grow a ton of them, but we do grow those. There are white flesh watermelons, there are orange flesh watermelons, but that is really, Asia gets into that a lot. Spain does that a lot. But we'll do a few acres of yellow seedless every year. So we've actually done some yellow seeded too, but
do they taste different?
So to your eyes, when you're looking at it, and I don't know if pineapples are influencing you or what, but you would think that they're sweeter, but when we brix them, they're the exact same. It's so strange. But anytime we do a taste test with them, people are always like, oh, this yellow one's so much sweeter. I'm like, well, technically it's not. Right. And, it is cool and it's a novelty, and we did grow them, so please buy them. That would be great.
I bought some yellow watermelons and some red fleshed melons and cubed them and mixed them up and just together and served it when I had some friends over once, and they thought, oh, that's cool. But anyway.
When you had some friends over once.
It sounds like that was a while ago.
One time.
You're just surprised to learn I have friends, Cynthia, aren't you?
Well, I didn't want to be that pointed. But now that you bring it up.
Well, if I invite friends
maybe
over,
that's why they only come over one time. Take care. I'll see you later.
Okay, now you mentioned Asia and watermelons. How about cube-shaped watermelons? Have you seen those? You're going to grow those?
My uncle, I don't know if he'll listen to this or he'll never listen to this, but he's always into the interesting, obscure things. So he got some plexiglass boxes and did some of that. Not for commercial purposes, just to say he did it. He's the only that I know of. He's the only watermelon farmer I know that's ever done it. Right. But he just wanted to see what is it like. One of my cousins, Kyler, he got some molds and grew, and that does happen, especially over there, specialty things, but they were heart-shaped watermelons.
Oh, wow.
So, you can do it. There's different things out there.
It's a novelty, not a commercial.
It's a novelty, though. Yeah. And we feel like we're very good at like the specialty things. Just in what we do as a group, we're really good at moving a lot of watermelon, but not, stuff like that is just, I don't know.
But come on, Rachel, how much easier would they be to stack in those bins?
I think we'd have a lot less issues on trucks and shipping all around.
Well, for some of our listeners, they may not know what we're talking about. In Japan, they grow these watermelons in boxes, and they come out completely cube-shaped, and they get hefty price for them. But, Japan is another planet when it comes to fruits and vegetables and what they'll pay for. They'll pay thousands of dollars for some of their fruits, but anyway, I'm just curious if you
really, the thing I love about that I want to catch on here, so maybe this will be the place I say it and it just lights the world on fire.
Okay.
When they go to someone's house, they would not bring a bottle of wine or this or dessert. They always bring a piece of whole fresh fruit.
That's right.
I love that. That's so great. That's like, look, give the kids an apple instead of a lollipop. All right. Yeah. Well, we go over to people's houses. Let's bring them a big old watermelon.
Yeah, it's very symbolic. There's a lot of meaning behind what they give and when they give it and for what occasions, and symbolism and good luck is usually always something.
Yeah, and pineapples or welcome. Yeah, they're very, very creative. I love that. I wish we take a little note from it.
Okay, let's give our listeners some practical advice here. Can you tell them, this has got to be the biggest question I remember at our markets. How do you pick a watermelon? Tell them how to pick a good watermelon.
All right. So when you're at the store or a farmer's market and you're looking, the first thing you want to do is look at it. A watermelon should look even if it's oblong, it should look symmetrical. It shouldn't have any outstanding bumps or funny kind of shapes or knobs along it. You should lift it up. Everybody has to do a pat test, and we'll address that. Pick it up. It should feel heavy for its size. So a watermelon is 92% water. So when you pick it up, you should be surprised at how heavy it feels. And then they always say, look, lift, and turn. So our watermelon board taught me. So when you turn it over, you're looking for that ground spot. So watermelons grow off of a vine and they sit on the ground. There's too many of them out there for us to be turning them in the sun all the time. They do develop a yellow, should be yellow ground spot. So I would say if it's the color of like butter yellow or darker, that is an indication of ripeness. So if nothing else, if you only remember one thing from the whole podcast, find a yellow spot on the watermelon, even if it's not pretty or it has something funky going on inside, it'll taste sweet. And then you've got success. At least you can eat it and it's delicious.
Right.
So look, lift, and turn.
Yeah, but no thumping.
Okay, the thumping. Let me tell you, I see people do it in the stores. Like, I'm a weirdo. I'm like stalking the watermelon bins a little bit. I'm just standing there. I have an 11-year-old. We're both kind of watching you shop the watermelon.
That's great.
Weird. And we watch people thump, and like they don't even. It's just what we look like to do. Just patting them all, touching, spreading germs everywhere. But so if you're a thumper, when you're thumping on it, what you're hoping to hear is like an echoing back hollow sound. Allegedly, that means it's formed on the inside. If you tap it and it sounds kind of dull, like a dull thud, that could mean that it's hollow and it's got a split through it. Just isn't all the way there yet.
Right.
But the way I hear and the way you hear is so different that it's so
that's a good point.
To tell people that, we all hear at different, levels. So to me, if you just follow the look, lift, and turn, you're going to get home with a very decent watermelon. You're not going to do stuff about it.
Look, lift, and turn, people. That's what you got to do. Now, I was shown a method back in the day when we were selling and I was buying all those watermelons, which I'm very skeptical of. It never worked. But have you ever heard of taking like a straw from a broom? Oh my
gosh, I knew you were going to say that.
You want to tell them? You tell them.
Okay, yeah. So this is such a strange thing to do. So imagine, you're the produce clerk at a back store. So you grab an old dusty broom and you pull, one straw out of it, one broom thistle, and you would set it on top of the watermelon. And if it turns, I don't remember which way it's supposed to do, but if it turns, that means it's like ready to go. It's not hollow, it's ripe, it's perfect.
Right.
Not one time. Not one time have I seen that work. But I do tell people that all the time when they ask. I'm like, wow, that's also this theory. My kid probably does parlor tricks at school with watermelon.
You
I don't think that's it. You don't got to walk around with a broom in your pocket.
Right. And you got to make sure there's absolutely no air stirring at all. Right?
Yes, right. The air AC cannot be on. No fans. No nothing.
Right. I was told by the person who first showed it to me, and he swore by it. Even though I could never prove it, that it was like a divining rod for finding water. You've heard of those, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So that there's something about the water would turn it, like a divining rod is supposed to move when you're out searching. But anyway, I don't believe the divining rod stuff works either.
Well, the old school way, when I was little and people would come up and they'd want to buy just truckloads of watermelons, they wanted you to plug the watermelon. Right. They wanted you to cut out that little piece and let me taste this thing. Let me see it. Let me look at it. So there's not a lot of our watermelons that get sold like that for roadside stands, but when they do, we're just donating one to the cause. Let's cut that bad boy in half. We're all having a snack. Let's take a bite right out of the heart and then
Right. We used to plug watermelons for people. We didn't offer it, but if they asked for it, we would do it.
That's right.
But we finally just got into a policy. We were selling so many of them and they were usually all good. So we just said, look, if it's bad, just come back and bring the watermelon. We first started telling them, bring the watermelon back. And that became kind of messy. So we eventually said, we'll just take your word for it. Yeah, just tell us it was bad. We'll give you another one and give you
That's right.
And you know what? I think after we started that policy, we never had anybody come back and say it was bad.
I mean, we try to be ultra transparent in all the things we do. We have a website. We put our growers on there. So, people like to see that. We have a lot of info, but one of the things that we do get our website is also on our label. So if someone cuts into them, I bet we get 10 or 15 messages a week. Some are good, some are bad. And it's, hey, I had the best watermelon in my life and I'm 82 years old.
Wow.
Or, hey, I cut into this one, guys. And just so you know, something was up. And in those, obviously we want to do our research even more. I'm on it. Can you send me a picture? What was going on? What sort of so we can see if there's, not because it's a food safety thing ever, but it's it was hollow or it was underripe.
Right.
And then we can go back and talk to our teams about that. We don't harvest a watermelon early. We harvest it when it's ripe because it doesn't continue to ripen as time goes on, like some fruits do. So that's a true error, and it's on us. So we welcome that feedback, and we get in touch with those people and say, hey, reach out, send us your address. We'll mail you a refund. Like, we're happy to guarantee that product, because it is very few and far between. We ship millions of watermelons a year, and we might get 20 of those a year that are mad. Right. So it's not too upsetting. Every now and then they get a seed in a seedless watermelon. Throws everybody for a loop. What is going on?
Even the seedless have little seeds. I mean, there's absolutely no such thing as a completely seed-free watermelon, isn't it?
No, not unless it was, seedless or not genetically modified, right? Like, that's a whole different topic, but they're not. So yeah, there's still little seeds in there, and they could mature if the plant's under stress. So it's nothing too exciting. Be pumped about it and eat it and spit it out and go back to your childhood. It'll be great.
Okay, back to some more practical advice. So when you get the watermelon home, what should you do with it? How do you store it? And what's the best way to make sure it lasts? Or if in my house, they don't last, but anyway.
Right. If you're someone who is not going to eat it that day, or if you're going to eat it the next day, there is a little bit of personal preference. I'll interject here. If you're someone who likes a cold watermelon, put it in the fridge right when you get home, cut it within 2 or 3 days, and then you need to eat it within 2 or 3 days once cut. Okay. But if it's going to sit on your counter, a watermelon grew outside in 80 to 100 degree temperature. It traveled in an ambient temperature. It went to a store in ambient temperature. So it can sit on your counter for up to 10 days like that. I mean, it's fruit, right? The sooner you cut it, definitely the fresher it's going to be. But yes, so you can store it either way. But if you're storing it in your fridge, you need to cut it sooner, if that makes sense.
And watermelons do not ripen after they're cut, right? They do not.
No matter, there's some special fruits. If you put this fruit next to that fruit, it'll speed it up or whatever. No, none of that. So it's already, once we cut it off the vine, that's as ripe as it's going to get, and it's going to slowly start its breakdown process. But it's a few weeks from the time it's cut off the vine, and it takes about 5 days to get into your store and into your home. So you have at least 10 to 12 days to make progress on eating that watermelon.
What about freezing watermelon? What would you tell our listeners about that? I know you can freeze it.
You definitely can. I would cut it before you freeze it.
That's really good.
I have had people like, I wanted frozen ice cream, so I threw it in the freezer, and I'm like, what? You better have a chainsaw. You can definitely freeze watermelon. I would say the easiest way, whether, for an adult or a kid, is to freeze it in chunks, like in little squares. And you can throw it as ice in a drink. You can shave it down later. You can do whatever you want with it. But definitely, if it's cut any way you want to put it, again, probably in the size you're going to eat it later. So if you just cut the rind off and it's one big ball of flesh, it's also going to be very solid.
Once it thaws, though, is it going to be?
Right. It's going to thaw funny if it's very big. So I would say small cubes or even spears. That would all be okay, but anything bigger than that, like a whole quarter of a watermelon, wouldn't do good either. Cubes is really the best, in my opinion. My well-tested, multi-generation opinion.
That's what I do. I usually bring it home right away. Usually they're too big to fit in my refrigerator. It takes up too much room anyway. They fit, but it's too much room. So I just cut it up in cubes and store it in the fridge. What about some recipes? Watermelon, people think of just eating it out of hand, eating a slice, but I have seen so many creative recipes over the years, past few years especially. What are some of your favorite?
I've seen a lot. I will tell you, I think it's probably best served cooled. There's a lot of cooked watermelon recipes. You have to really be a watermelon purist to enjoy that. You have to just like watermelon for the sake of flavor, because you're losing texture when you cook it.
I have not seen any cooked watermelon recipes. That's new to me.
Yes, there are people that grill it.
I have seen that.
Slice. Yeah, it's kind of grilled or charred. There's a lot of like chicken and waffles and watermelon recipes out there. That I think is served best if it's cooled. My favorite, I am obsessed, and it is have a whole moment this summer in my household, is watermelon with honey, but like one of these chili infused honeys that are making kind of all the rage. got a little spicy and sweet kind of thing to it. And you can add a feta cheese or something if you want. But I think that's a really easy, simple way to keep it fresh in your house, right? That's definitely a party pleaser. Any watermelon and feta and balsamic combination on a salad, on a skewer, those are very simple and popular. And then let us not forget, watermelon makes a great juice, which means if you're interested, it makes a really great cocktail. So there are a lot of watermelon with tequila, a lot of watermelon based drinks out there, but I would say a watermelon margarita is probably the most common. And the sugar that's already in the watermelon makes it to where you don't have to add a simple syrup or something.
That's a good point.
So it makes it a little healthier option for those that are trying to keep it as a lower carb, lower sugar kind of option.
Right. One of the recipes that I didn't make it myself. I went to a party where they had it, was a watermelon gazpacho.
Oh yes. And
that was so good. It was sort of like what you were describing with the honey and the spicy honey, because it was sweet and savory with some spices. It was really good. I'll have to get the recipe. I can't even remember what the recipe was exactly, but it was the watermelon was the dominant flavor in it. But it was really good. Right. So
I've seen a big push this year in watermelon salsas too. So we always say that we're a lycopene leader, right? It's super good for your heart. So lycopene is the thing that makes the watermelon red. Well, it's also the thing that makes a tomato red. But for folks that are looking for something a little different than a traditional tomato salsa, watermelon is a really good substitute for that. And you can spice it up with jalapeno and things like that if you'd like to.
Right. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, refreshing.
I have had that before and other times. Okay. Now, do you eat the rinds?
No, for a long time. Of course not. But I am a member. I'm with the watermelon promotion board, and they are always looking for new innovative ways. And they, we realize a lot of people don't eat the rind, but it's very edible. So under a kind of a use the whole watermelon campaign, we learned about some of that, and that's having a moment too. Obviously, there's a lot of people that pickle the rind. Right. There's a lot of people that are shredding the rind into slaws.
Oh, wow.
Just to use more of the watermelon, to not feel a certain type of way about wasting so much of it. So for folks that are trying, either because you're adventurous and you just love watermelon, or for those that are trying to eliminate something you would have thrown away, it is a really good option for stuff like that.
Right. And as you said, it's a lot like a cucumber.
A lot like a cucumber. Yeah. That's actually a watermelon's closest living produce relative.
Oh, okay.
It's actually a cucumber. I think a lot of people think pumpkin or squash, or some people even think other melons, maybe, that aren't in a part of the business. But with no relation to cantaloupe or honeydew or anything like that. But a cucumber is our closest. Watermelon is a cucurbit by scientific.
Oh, right. I remember seeing that term.
So yeah, it's a very plain, non-flavorful substance, but it's got a crunch to it. So there's a lot of different unique ways to use that.
Right. Yeah, growing up in our markets, we used to sell some canned products like chow. You heard of chow?
Yes.
And honey and jams and jellies. But there was a woman who used to make these for us, and she did the pickled watermelon rinds. Mm-hmm. I was never fond of them as a kid, but now I do like them.
Right. It would be an acquired taste, I think, for a kid, but I like them. You don't see them in stores. It's something someone has to make or you have to make. Right. And I don't think that's adorable. Like, wow, I'd love to be selling my rinds to whatever, processor out there wants to do that, call me. But other than that, I think it's neat that somebody has to make it for you, or you have to make it yourself.
Right.
It's a very unique thing.
Well, speaking of process, you mentioned juice. I know there's a couple of watermelon juice companies out there. Yeah. Are you guys into that or thinking about it, or?
That we fully support those. We like them, we drink them, but yeah, no, that's its own the beverage business is very competitive.
Oh yeah.
There are a few small local juicers in different states that we'll be in at a time. There's one in Georgia, one in Florida, that they'll say, hey, can we just come pick up? They always prefer seeded watermelons for that, at least in our experience, because they are a little sweeter. Because they're gonna juice them down. But yeah, no, it's a very interesting business. It's another good way to consume watermelon.
Right. Okay, you talked about pumpkins and carving. At the trade shows, Melon One and Rachel always bring this very talented artist
He
who carves watermelons. It's some of the most beautiful. I'm going to put some on the website so our listeners can go and see them. But tell us about him and the work he does.
I will. He's one of my favorite humans I've ever met in this life. And his name is Chef Joseph Poon. He is out of Philadelphia, is where he lives. And he is a watermelon carving chef. So he obviously has all your traditional chef backgrounds. He works for every trade show or event we go to. So sometimes we're doing a retail event or a consumer event. He does amazing carvings.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I give him a theme, sometimes I don't. I say, just carve whatever you want. And it's the beautiful floral things you've seen, or it's characters from a movie, but he carves them, he paints on them, he does all kinds of things. And there are multiple tiers, and 3 or 4 on the bottom, and then 3 or 4, skewered in on top of that, and then another layer on top of that. It's very impressive. But he always does a few watermelon recipes to go with it on the side to sample for people. And he's a very talented chef. He has owned restaurants. He has trained countless young folks. And then at this point in time, he sold his restaurant, and he does some events with us. He does some events with others, but he volunteers so much of his time, and he goes into assisted living and nursing homes with people that don't have a ton of family around, and just brightens up their day. And he does the same carvings. I mean, we pay him to do. They're for free just to brighten people's day. I mean, he is
such a nice person, always a smile on his face. And,
chefs are a certain breed of people, right? He doesn't have an ego, and he should. I mean, he's really a talented human, and his ego does not get in his way. He's very approachable, and he really has worked with watermelon for so long. He's excited to talk about it, which, kind of matches our energy. So it's good.
That's good. Very good. Very good. Okay. So, Teresa, do you have something? Okay. Now we'll tell Rachel. Let me introduce. So, Rachel, we have a segment on each of the podcasts called Homegrown. And Teresa loves her puns. So she always brings a pun for this segment. And we call it Homegrown because they're always so bad. We don't laugh at them. You have to groan.
Okay.
And it's usually the puns are usually in the form of a question, and we try to guess it. No, they're not always a question, but usually they are. So she'll tell the pun, I'll repeat it, and we'll give you a chance to see if you can think of the answer. We'll all try to think of an answer too. Of course, Teresa knows it already. But anyway, so I'll introduce Homegrown, and then we'll have Teresa present it.
Okay.
So, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, it's time for your favorite segment on the Produce Buzzers podcast. Yes, it's time for Homegrown. No, don't run away. Don't turn the radio off. Don't push the pause button. You have to stay and get punished by Teresa. Teresa, what is the homegrown of the day?
Well, it's a question. Why did the heirloom watermelon get kicked out of the Fresh Fruit Club?
Okay. All right. Why did the heirloom, it's got to be heirloom watermelon, get kicked out of the Fresh Fruit Club? Cynthia, what do you think? Nothing?
I got nothing.
How about you, Rachel?
Because it was too old? I don't
know. I don't know. It was melancholy. No, that's a different one. No. Well, okay. Why did the heirloom watermelon get kicked out of the Fresh Fruit Club?
They thought he was too seedy.
Oh.
Wow, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was pretty good, actually. Well, thank you for that. And thank you, Rachel, for joining us.
Thank you guys very much for having me and letting me share a little bit about what we do and why we do it. I appreciate that.
I love your passion. It's great. So thanks very much. I hope you have a great week, and hope to see you again very soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Bye. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Produce Buzzers podcast, brought to you by Produce Buzz. the gathering place for lovers of fresh fruits and veggies. We hope you were entertained a bit and educated a lot about fresh produce. Be sure to join us next time, and please tell your friends to do so as well. Like, share, and comment on our Produce Buzz Facebook page. And check out our website at www.producebuzz.com. There you will find articles about fresh fruits and veggies, how to select, store, and prepare them, as well as lots of interesting facts about all the wonderful bounty the earth provides for us. Until next time, be fruitful and don't forget to veg out.